Graduation is one of the biggest milestones in a person's life. Years of studying, late nights, tests, projects, all leading up to a single ceremony. But have you ever stopped and wondered about the outfit? The cap, the gown, the tassel? Why do graduates all dress this way? And why does a modern graduation ceremony involve clothing that looks like it belongs hundreds of years in the past? In this video, we'll explore where graduation caps and gowns came from, why students started wearing them in the first place, and why this centuries-old tradition has survived all the way to today. And if you enjoy learning the hidden reasons behind everyday things, consider subscribing and let us know what we should cover next. If you attended a graduation recently, you probably saw hundreds of people dressed almost exactly the same. Black robes, square caps, tassels hanging from the side. It's such a familiar sight that most people never question it, but the tradition actually goes back much further than most people realize. To understand it, we have to travel back nearly 1,000 years. The first universities in Europe began appearing during the Middle Ages. Places like Oxford and Cambridge were educating students long before modern schools existed. Back then, universities looked very different from the campuses we know today. Many classes were held in large stone buildings. These buildings were often cold, drafty, and difficult to heat. Students and teachers needed clothing that would keep them warm while they studied. Long robes were practical. They provided warmth, covered most of the body, and were commonly worn by educated people of the time. But there was another reason for the robes. Many early scholars were closely connected to the church. In medieval Europe, education and religion were often linked. Many professors and students were members of the clergy or trained within religious institutions. As a result, academic clothing began to resemble the robes worn by religious leaders. Over time, these robes became associated with learning itself. If you saw someone wearing a robe, there was a good chance they were a scholar, and that connection became an important symbol. The clothing wasn't just practical anymore. It represented education, knowledge, and achievement. But what about the cap? That famous square hat has its own history. The graduation cap is usually called a mortarboard. Many historians believe its shape was inspired by hats worn by scholars and clergy centuries ago. Others point out that the flat top resembles a tool called a mortarboard, which bricklayers use to hold mortar while building walls. Regardless of its exact origin, the cap eventually became another symbol of academic achievement. And like the gown, it spread from one university to another. As universities grew across Europe, many adopted similar traditions. Students dressed alike during important ceremonies. The clothing helped identify them as members of the academic community. Eventually, these traditions crossed oceans. As universities were established in North America and elsewhere, they brought many of these customs with them. And over time, the cap and gown became a standard part of graduation ceremonies around the world. But there's one more piece of the outfit people often notice: the tassel. Today, moving the tassel from one side of the cap to the other is a symbolic moment during many graduation ceremonies. It represents the transition from student to graduate, a simple gesture, but one loaded with meaning. Which raises an interesting question. If these traditions are so old, why do we still keep them? After all, modern students don't need robes to stay warm in cold stone buildings. The answer is tradition. Graduation isn't just about receiving a diploma, it's about marking an achievement. The cap and gown connect today's graduates to generations of students who came before them. People separated by decades, or even centuries, all sharing the same symbolic moment. The clothing reminds us that education is part of a much larger story, a tradition passed from one generation to the next, and that's why, even in a world filled with modern technology, students still walk across the stage wearing clothing inspired by the Middle Ages. So the next time you see a graduation ceremony, take a closer look at the outfit. What seems like a simple cap and gown is actually a tradition that has survived for hundreds of years, a symbol of learning, achievement, and the long history of education itself. This has been Questions Answered. If there's another everyday thing you've wondered about, let us know in the comments. And if you enjoy learning the hidden reasons behind everyday things, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.